All right. Hi, everyone. Derek has usually started us off historically on this new podcast, but
It's a long
today
history, yeah.
it's a long history of 4 episodes. 4 today, actually, one came out.
Mhm.
We're recording at the end of August here, but today is a special day. And because it's special, I'm going to start us off. We are doing our first podcast collaboration, cross pod, podination. Um, and I'm so happy to welcome Geoff Alexander of the Trade Movies podcast. You may have seen his content all around. He does awesome work, sort of breaking down American film history and its politics, and just like generally engaging in film as text. And is affectionately known by some on the dirtbag left as the woker. And it's just
yeah.
really great to have you, Geoff, along with me and Derek.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know that I've been on another, it's probably been years since, I think before I started my podcast that I've been on another podcast. So this is exciting.
Well, then the honor is all ours, I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, you've been at the game for a while, and we're newbies on the scene. But you know, I hear a lot of podcasts and they do collaborations, and I thought this would be cool. And I bet Geoff would have another. I think you and I were messaging, and you'd said, "Oh, you know, have you seen this movie, The Falls?" I feel like that's what you two do when you do your document spelunking. And I was like, "Oh, we should do it again," because it was so cool. Geoff had me on his podcast, and we talked about a couple films, and it was just such a great way to talk about school finance. So yeah, Derek and I,
the Saragossa manuscript we talked about, which I made sure and I have 2 copies actually near me. There's one back there, but the
close to your heart,
on
that
the
one.
giant stacks. Yeah, love it. Yeah,
So,
thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go.
I was just going to say, yeah, I appreciate you watching the Saragossa manuscript firstly. You're probably, I feel like I owe you. I mean, I did watch an hour 40 of school board meetings for this, which is like probably kind of crazy for people not involved in your world. But periodically when I watch these sort of more opaque kind of like weirder movies like The Falls or like the Saragossa manuscript, I just, in my head, I think about this just being your guys' life, which is just very funny to me. It makes the movies funnier by badging these movies like the Saragossa manuscript is like purposely, you know, trying to sort of deconstruct narrative, and then The Falls obviously is The Falls. But then I just picture you guys doing this all day, and it just tickles me. I don't know. So I appreciate you too watching this.
That was actually my own very initial reaction to The Falls. I'm like, wait, I feel like this is what we do. Like, this is a fictionalized version of a documentary that's hovering around some truth that never quite appears. And then I'm like, and we talk about that a lot on the show.
Yeah. There's a violent. What is it? The violent
violent
unknown
event.
The violent unknown event.
Violent unknown event. Yeah, the violent unknown event. It's like capital. But like, we can get into that. So here's how we're gonna do today. What we did is we asked Geoff if he had any requests for school districts for us to look at, because that's the sort of theme of our podcast, is we take requests. And he requested Roane County, Tennessee, in eastern Tennessee, specifically, around like ag or technical paths in the education system there, but also mentioning some of the very deep and very unnerving, like dystopian movie kinds of stuff that has happened in this county, both mid-century and recently in the 21st century. So I think there's a lot to talk about, but also Geoff and we also asked Geoff to watch some school board meetings from Roane County, and he asked us to watch a film called The Falls. And so we're gonna just put all that in the pot and stir it and see what happens. So I think maybe how we usually start, Geoff, is we read the request. So maybe I'll read the request that you wrote initially, and then I'm going to throw it to you, and you can just sort of elaborate a little bit, tell everyone how you got to that and your experience, and then Derek and I will sort of tell you our report back.
Sure. That sounds great.
So your initial request was, I would love to know anything about, quote, technical path or ag path, or the kind of trade school type funding, if that's something you cover. We had a lot of that at my school since it was rural. Like, you could go on a technical path as a kid if you wanted to go into some kind of trade. So why don't you just talk a little bit about where that came from, where you're coming from, etc.
Yeah, so uh, I'm trying to think of, well, I don't think any of it's going to be identifiable, but I for sure graduated with at least a couple people who you would probably classify as illiterate. And this isn't like, it's actually kind of like in the light of the whole Jason Arday stuff, which is kind of like I didn't even think about before sort of hopping on the call. But like in terms of like that part of the story, like they'll not even gonna get into that, but like never surprised me because like in my school, so I went to a small 200, I think when I went there it was 260 kid public high school. And I think during the course of the board meeting, they were talking about graduating seniors across the entire county. There was 450 graduating seniors for this past year, which seems small. I think I went to many people I've known have like had graduating classes bigger than that just at their school. The technical path, like when they were sort of segmenting the kids, it was like there was like a couple kids, at least in my school, this was public school, that were like probably going to go to college, which was like me and like a couple other kids. And then a lot of them, there was something called the technical path, and you could choose this when you were 13 or 14. And I remember even when I was like 13 or 14, I was like, this seems like you're kind of like, I don't know about like giving up, but it's like, it seems kind of weird to like sort of designate a kid to like this kind of technical path. I mean, like this was like even before sort of like, I don't know if 2005 to like when I went into starting going to high school, like before I don't know, sort of when the push of like STEM, like get people into trade schools happened. But certainly like the idea of the technical path as I understood it was like you go to the technical path and like because you're going to work on a farm or you're going to like be a mechanic or you're going to like go work at a factory or something or like get maybe some like 2-year associate or like professional degree, and they would sort of put a lot of the kids in there. But that always seemed weird to me, one, because like I thought like ostensibly the goal of most public education in America was to at least produce like kids that were able to be sort of 4-year college educated even back then. But two, there was sort of a hybrid of like, they ended up graduating a lot of kids in sort of a weird way. It felt like, who were kind of borderline on like special education. And I'm not even saying that to be like crass or like in a mean way. It's like, we had a lot of like, there's a long, if you want to separate to the podcast, but like, if you want to find out sort of more about that history, I did a podcast on this movie called The Lynchburg Story, and like the history of sort of like kind of borderline special education stuff in Appalachia as a whole, is fascinating. And like, it's where the Holocaust started. That sounds like a crazy sentence to say, but like in the Virginia State Colony for the epileptics and feeble-minded, they had like this whole thing where they were sort of sterilizing kids and people, sort of on the borderline of all this stuff. So there's kind of like a cultural thing where like our special education system, we called it like the big room and the little room, where it's like the big room would have sort of borderline kids, and then the little room would have like, there'd be like a washer and dryer in there. But it was sort of like a tiered school, which was just so crazy because it was like little room, big room, and then it was like technical path, and it was like, okay, maybe you're going to college or something, which just struck me as weird. And then just when I was thinking about it, I was like wondering like, well, you know, how does that get funded by the state? And then there's the whole sort of ghost inspector passus of like Kingston itself. When David alluded to it in the opening, it is right west of Oak Ridge National Laboratory and Y12 security complex, where we keep all of the refined uranium in the country. It's like one of the core things of the Manhattan Project when they talked about Tennessee in the movie Oppenheimer. So like sort of a lot of the population, less so where I live, but still significantly, are like descendants of people who sort of like worked at the big coal plant. It was formerly the world's biggest coal plant that then had the world's biggest environmental disaster in my hometown, or the United States' largest ever industrial disaster. And so with the TVA, with Y12 and Oak Ridge came the TVA, and I know there's a lot of funding there, and like, yeah, so just the whole mess of, I don't know, maybe this is like therapeutic. I'm just trying to figure out, how did this happen?
Cool.
Like,
yeah. And I mean,
I don't know.
Derek, I'll throw it to you next, but I just wanted to say, like, how relevant is this film you had us watch with a violent unknown event at the center of something that so profoundly impacts the lives of all different kinds of people in all of these different ways, that like the movie is funny, like it's absurdist, and you know it, but it is structured in this very you know, kind of rigid way about how this event has like, some people are immortal now, other people are like turning into birds or obsessed with birds, and like the kind of, you know, like the vibe here in this district, and also on TikTok, I've gotten a lot of responses on this. Like, the vibe is Stranger Things, right? Like the vibe is you have this American rural community with this like government nuclear radioactive thing going on somewhere in the forest, and
Yeah.
where like it employs most of the people, but also like is entirely secretive, and it has its roots way back to the Manhattan Project. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, you know, some of the things that we found in terms of career and technical education for Roane County schools, like is deeply connected to this.
Yeah,
And
fascinating.
just what a fascinating terrain. But Derek, I wanted to see what you thought. I don't know, initial thoughts or stuff you wanted to add, put on the table.
Okay. What I want to put on the table in general is first of all, I'm really grateful for these questions, because in none of the things that we have talked about has like career and technical education come up so far, but it's become a more and more load-bearing piece of federal and state funding. It's something that the state and federal government, since the Perkins Act was originally passed in 1983, has been trying to fund. It is bound up with a whole history of racialized and like targeted at disabled students, a way of pretending to provide an education that goes nowhere and reinforces a caste system. And we have not talked about this aspect of public schools at all. But then the presence of Oak Ridge in particular, and the Oak Ridge city schools are a different district, and that's
Yes.
that matters as well. It is exactly Stranger Things. Like you can see Stranger Things being modeled on this. It just so happens that I'm also reading Annie Jacobson's Operation Paperclip right now, like the big history of, and so like that is hugely relevant to everything that we are talking about with secrecy and the governing Cold War logics of everything is permitted because it might help us against the Soviets, or because maybe the Soviets are doing it too.
Yeah.
Anyway, but also, you know, I had said that watching the falls made me feel like I was inside my own head a lot. In an earlier episode, we drew accidentally a distinction between the wonkery and the juiciness that is going on in every school district. Like there's always drama of one kind or another. And then there's always something like the cold bureaucratic numbers. And really the beauty of the falls is that it puts those genres together, or helps me remember anyway, that they're never really disentangled entirely. Like the one can outweigh the other, but this is an attempt to tell a story about the enduring legacy of this particular event in a documentary fashion, which is what I feel like we are doing very often when we're doing like this forensic work of looking at budget documents and loan terms and state funding policies and all that kind of stuff. It all bears on the decisions that districts are making about what kind of education to provide, about where to allocate resources. But it isn't the whole story. And as we've said many, many times, there's a ton of flexibility within those. And so, yeah, I am grateful for the combination of these questions and texts.
Yeah. Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, the sort of the comparison of like the VUE to just like the violent unknown event to like Roane County and the Kingston. So if you're out there, it's the Kingston Fossil Plant coal fly ash slurry spill on Wikipedia is what you can look up, which was like, I think it was 100 times bigger than the Exxon Valdez, six times bigger than the Deepwater Horizon, of coal ash that has been dumped into the Tennessee that like this retaining pond dumped and spilled in the Tennessee River.
Extremely poisonous. Coal ash is really, really, really bad.
Highly. I've been
the name does not do justice to how bad it is.
It's the American Chernobyl. I've taken to calling it, because since then, in the intervening like 15 years since the cleanup, so like when I would return home after cleanup, you'd see these trucks coming in and out, just like honestly like the sort of motif of the circle. Just like it's sort of like in a weird way, the circle, like there's constant circles in the falls that people are sort of like moving.
Right, people are just driving around traffic circles like they.
Yeah, this would be the truck sort of circling and like going to like put it to another dump. Which actually, speaking of racialized, you know, is horrible. There's multiple sort of racialized things about this, but they one of the things is that all the coal ash they trucked to a very black county, I believe in Alabama, like a majority black county, in like 90% in Alabama, that just sort of took it and is now living with all that coal ash. But yeah, that's it compounded an already existing nuclear nightmare. I think in the intervening years since the cleanup, I think over 50, maybe 75 people have died. Another couple hundred are dying. Like it is literally one of the worst industrial acts is in U.S. history. Like, in very few people know about it for whatever reason. There's a great book about it from Jared Sullivan. Shout out him. I had a chance to get him on the pod. But yeah, I think like the both the falls and honestly even doing like this these school board meetings were tripping me out because one of my old principal was on there, so just like, but he was like a side character. Just even like watching him like filmically, they were like the way they were shot was just kind of like the real like policy meeting, like with all the light spilling in and just like the sound cutting out, and it really did feel like it's like something that you're trying to sort of dig through and wonder why it's happened. And I didn't know about basically any of this stuff when I went to high school. So like my experience of going to high school, like I did know like the technical path, all that stuff, but then finding out afterwards, like we would see, you brought up Derek, like stuff that sort of like in light of the Cold War and like like all the things we sort of justified in light of the Cold War. I'm like when I watched Forrest Gump, I think in high school, like I just thought like, oh, it's like, yeah, of course these guys in the army. I didn't know what like McNamara's morons or like McNamara's like, you know, the sort of Project 100,000 of like getting these sort of like I guess like lower IQ or lower educational attainment people in the military, like that's what sort of Forrest Gump was playing with. I just thought like, well, I go to school something like these are just sort of like kind of technical path kids or something like that. I hate to say, like
I mean, it is not. I'll just like I want to add this point. Daniel Patrick Moynihan very famously wrote what is it called? The Negro Family, A Case for National Action, the Moynihan Report in the early 1960s. And that gets the appropriate amount of opprobrium for a lot of things. But one of the things that goes unmentioned is that his job program for unemployed black men is literally the army, like at the time that the Vietnam War is dramatically escalating.
That's crazy.
I mean, that's shocking.
Yeah. I mean, it's places, I feel like, I get the sense that it's places like this county, where this sort of weirdness of the war machine just sort of exists and is maintained, but also like there's a mixture of apology for this war machine and also being on the sort of front end of some of its worst internal kinds of implications. There's a line from Michael Parenti that I always think about, which is that the empire feeds on the republic. And like, here we have a county on which the empire is definitely feeding. And we have, we have this case of the laboratory, which is still ongoing. The first employer of the county is the Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Oh yeah.
And I said this on TikTok, and there are a lot of comments coming in, and like people are saying, "Oh, but Oak Ridge isn't in Roane County. It's in
That's right.
It's in the other county. Is it Anderson? It's in a nearby county." And then I was like, "But it's notable that when you look up Roane County employment figures, by far the highest employer is Oak Ridge. The second highest is an organization called UCOR, which is a company that is specifically in business to clean up after Oak Ridge. So so that employs the next number of people.
We're a bit of a drain if you think about it.
It's the American nightmare. I mean, but I think, and I also like there's a way of viewing these school board meeting recordings as though they're avant-garde film in a way. Like, there are these people, you're coming in media res, like the filming of these things is so, people, they are certainly made in a certain way. But I thought maybe at this point we'd get into some of the things we found about your specific questions now that we've set the scene a little bit. So I think there's all kinds of really interesting things that I came upon, and I know Derek, you were looking at it too. We did look at another Tennessee school district for one of our previous episodes, so we did have some background. Typically, we look at like deficit issues, and so a lot of our analysis comes from figuring out why it is that a school district is having money problems, and to like in a sort of another weird consonance with the violent. It was an unnamed, unidentified, unknown event. The violent unknown event. The violent unknown event, and another sort of consonant with that theme. Like, I did find in the minutes to the most recent school board meeting that they did report that the school district is having short-term challenges fiscally. But I'm gonna ask Derek if he has actually figured this out definitively. But I did not. When I was looking at this, I was like, I don't actually know what the explicit problem is here. And someone on TikTok said no one here seems to understand either. But the problems are leading them to look at purchasing land to have as an asset, and they are doing a 10-year capital planning process.
Right, we got to talk about that.
And they are actually soliciting requests for proposals, essentially from vendors to help them do 10-year capital planning. After school was like recently consolidated, now they want to build another one, and they're actually going to there's some kind of program from the Tennessee state government that creates something called infrastructure development districts, where they're going to be able to create a development district and do some building, and they want to purchase land to have as an asset, maybe to sell later or something. But like the theories, Derek, I feel like we've generated for this little, and then we'll get to the career and technical stuff. But just to sort of set the fiscal scene a little, like, I think you mentioned this, Derek, like one possibility could be that Tennessee state recently mandated increases in all local government employees, including teachers, which is through our Williamson County, the one that we most recently analyzed, into a bit of a deficit. Do you want to elaborate, Derek, a little?
Yeah. Let me recap some of how Tennessee state education funding works. This is an unusual case because most of the time when people come to us with questions, they're like, it has just come across their radar that their district is in dire financial straits and they're trying to understand why. And that's not the case here. The district isn't in dire financial straits, although it is facing short-term pressures. In 2023, the state of Tennessee changed the way that it does funding. They switched from a BEP plan to a TISA plan. All of this will be in the show notes. The big thing to know is that Tennessee sets a foundation. It sets a number that a pupil will receive to provide them an adequate education. Then it applies weights to that. You get additional money for it, like you have an additional allotment if you are disabled, if you're an English learner, if that sort of stuff. Then there is a third kind of funding, which is direct funding. And this will get us to the CTE stuff, where the state will allocate money that is earmarked for particular programs, including career and technical education, but also like fourth grade retention, early grade literacy instruction, that sort of thing. And then there's this fourth category, which is outcome bonuses, which we talked about in the Williamson County episode. This is basically what we described as merit pay for kids. In which districts that have really high achieving, so if you're a district that moves kids up in proficiency level or has a lot of high proficiency students, then those students get like more money. This is the opposite of like a compensatory funding model. You're just giving the people who are already doing well more, whatever. So there's two things going on that are causing financial squeezes all over Tennessee, including Roane County. The first is that this TISA base number, the average daily whatever, which is currently, or in 25-26, it was $7,295 per student. That has been rising, and the state has been contributing additional money to it on an ongoing basis, but at like an addition of maybe 2-ish% a year, 2.5%, 3.5%. Meanwhile, district expenditures are rising something like 5 to 8% a year. So districts are being squeezed by the fact that they're not allowed to raise enough revenue to cover their rising costs. And to the extent that they have the capacity to raise that stuff locally, the state keeps chipping in a smaller and smaller portion because the state's contribution is pegged to that base per student allotment.
Not
the
to
state
inflation, for instance.
Exactly. So like the state will like contribute, like they'll be like, okay, we will pay 30%, or like we expect you to cover 40% of your expenditures, and then we will backfill up to the line that we set. But if you need to spend above that line, they're still only going to backfill up to the line that they set. So it's a way of gradually shifting funding responsibility from the state level to the local level. That's one thing that squeezes. The other big thing is this clause mechanism called maintenance of effort, state level policy that requires that districts not make cuts on a per pupil basis to the amount of money that they spend year over year. This is great in terms of providing education to kids. They have to spend at least the same amount of money this year as last year. But because like that's the real stricture.
It's like hold harmless, but you have to do it to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. and
right.
Again,
you have to hold yourself harmless. Yeah.
This is another one of those mechanisms that moves responsibility for covering costs from the state level to the local level, which has all kinds of inequality generating effects.
Say if one county, Anderson County, had like one of the highest concentrations of PhDs in the country, because that's where people worked at Oak Ridge, and then Roane County, the sort of the other workers, that pot is sort of from a split thing. Like these would be, that would make sense. I think Oak Ridge, the county, I think is like up there with Boulder. I can't imagine Roane County is anywhere high on that list.
Well, we don't need to get into these weeds, but like Oak Ridge is also built on federal land, so it falls into some of the Alaska public lands
so they get
type thing. They don't have like property taxes. So it's just like they're much more heavily federally funded.
They're like federally funded. They're sort of taken care of, and it seems to me that Roane County is like the kind of labor. It's like it's really the sort of underclass county with respect to Anderson. But the other thing that's weird, and usually this is how it goes. Like Derek has this very well organized sort of understanding of how the state funding works, and then I have all this sort of messy debt stuff that I find. One of the things that I found was that, and I don't know why this would be. I think it's because Roane County is like bigger, maybe population wise, but for some reason. One theory that I had for why there might be fiscal problems is that Roane County is reporting a much lower net position fiscally, and the auditors in the 2025 statement note that one of the reasons why its net position is much lower is because it has to report the debt incurred by Oak Ridge schools. So the Oak Ridge schools, they have their debt obligations, okay? Roane County,
that school board is allowed to
they issue
levy
bonds,
debt.
They levy debt, But Roane County, for some reason, has to put the Oak Ridge schools' debt on their books. So that means that the liability for the net position of this Roane County district is like it's now subject to the debts of Anderson, not Anderson County, but Oak Ridge schools, which are in Anderson County.
We're like a sin eater, I guess. We're like a debt eater.
I was like, like a coal ash dump, you might say.
Yeah, or like a coal ash.
That's exactly right. They have to eat shit. They're eating shit. Like they are just eating from the shithole of
that's insane.
Being like sent out from Oak. I don't get it. I mean, but maybe just a couple fun things I think about. Maybe let's talk about the CTE now specifically.
Can I ask something before the CTE? Just a clarifying. When you said I think Derek, you said per student, like it was funded per student, and shifting from that. So like if someone was in like more special education, or if they like were like would they like get sort of a higher budget, I guess, than like a quote unquote normal student? Okay, that. There is a kind of shocking amount of fraud, at least that went on back when, I don't know how it is now, but like back in the day, there was a shocking amount of fraud to the point of like it was like there was like a sort of there were a lot of people in those those rooms, but also just even like every like couple months it seemed like you read about a case in the newspaper where like people were sort of like keeping like 4 or 5 sort of adults and kind of like stealing their disability, or stealing like these would be sort of like borderline adults. So I'm kind of, that if it's shifting from that, so it's fascinating.
2 clarifications. It's not shifting from that. Like most places, when we talk about like whatever, school funding is generally based on enrollment. It's just calculated differently in different states. In Tennessee, it's average daily membership. That's like the enrollment number. And the amount that any school district is authorized to receive is partly accorded by weighting students. So if you have two students and one of them has a disability and the other one doesn't, like the student with the disability has more revenue authority attached to them. But unlike like the cases of fraud where like people are like stashing, you know, I don't know, family members or neighbors or whatever, and collecting the checks, like there's not a money transfer from the state to an individual.
Okay.
At least not in this way. Tennessee also has a big voucher
but I mean,
program now.
Isn't the incentive feels rotten there? Like it almost feels like you'd be incentivized possibly as a school administrator, like if someone's on the borderline of like special education or not, to the point about maybe keeping people in the caste system. Am I totally misunderstanding that? Or like, seems like there might be some incentive if like someone's worth $7,500 a year or 7,000 or whatever the number is, that you would maybe have a vested interest in keeping that person.
Yeah,
I don't know,
Dave,
you
can weigh in on this after me. My initial thing here is like, yes, is the first kind of thing, but also there's so many competing incentives here because the amount of funding available to actually deliver special education services is never sufficient to the actual expenditures incurred by those people. So like, yes, you can, if you were to take someone who had zero disabilities, I mean, you have to also peg these expenditures to special education service provision.
Yeah.
Like is the thing that you have
and
to do on the
there's all kinds of compliance. I mean, the compliance is, you can't even imagine. It's rooms full of paper that you have to fill out to comply with, to get the funding. And I mean, so
to color this, oh, sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I think it's a good question to ask. But my sense is that in terms of the multiple incentives and between the multiple incentives and the compliance, you don't have this issue.
Yeah. Gotcha. I was just going to color it with my dad was a former advocate for special needs kids and disabled kids. He was a lawyer and sort of like would be like the advocate, sort of stopped doing that in Tennessee and was retired. But he would like he would substitute at my school sometimes, and like he would substitute in like the special education, and he would like just be appalled at the lack of budget, and also just like they you know, half the time the kids would be like playing cards and stuff and like the thing, and like it just like the services were
and this is like that's also the history of vocational education.
Yeah, I mean the reality, the gap between the discourse of like, for instance, multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, you know, in special education, and the reality of what actually happens in schools is yawning. I would say it's there's like you know, you can say like teachers have all kinds of fancy graphs and you get all kinds of information for all the
how come the left doesn't get to use the whole like, you know, communism is good in theory but bad in practice or whatever, you know, like you know, how come we don't get to use that for like school, like I don't know, vocational stuff or like
people don't understand, people don't get it.
Real.
I mean, part of it is the acronyms. I mean, people, you know, and also just but also ableism. I mean, ableism keeps a lot of this out of view. And frankly, in education, generally, it's a feminized a pursuit in political economy and in the social structure, such that things that happen in education, people are like, it's education. I want to talk about housing or transportation or this or that. But when it comes to education, they're like, I don't know. So there's like multiple barriers to entry here. There's one thing I wanted to bring up on the theme of fraud. That was another sort of question about something I found to change the channel. But look, Derek, did you want to say something else about that?
No, I thought about going on a different thread. Let me just tag on two little pieces of state funding stuff so that we can preview the financial picture just a little bit more.
Yeah.
This is the year that a $50,000 minimum teacher salary goes into effect, and that's compressing teacher salaries everywhere. That's my best guess as to what short-term financial issues are, because you can't raise the floor without also, to some degree, raising everybody else's salary. And so it's a state mandated additional expenditure that is not funded by the state. It's an unfunded mandate. And so more of that is falling on schools. Schools or districts have a harder time meeting it. That's one part of the picture. And the other big thing is the thing that you mentioned at the very beginning of the conversation. There are 5 high schools. Like this school district is the size of the school district where I live. And we have been having these facilities conversations and battles for years now because we have too many schools. And we have 11 and you guys have 18. And so like there's 5 high schools in this county. And in 2019, the school board went to the county board with a proposal to consolidate 3 of those high schools into one.
In Roane County?
And the county board voted 11
schools,
for,
do you know, or do you remember
against that.
What?
So
okay. No worries. Yeah.
I don't know that offhand. I can look that up real quickly, but they have just commissioned in 2024, they commissioned a new facility studies as part of their like long range facilities plan conversation. But the bottom line is like, you've got a couple hundred students in a bunch of high schools. And if teachers are getting more expensive on a, let's call it a per unit basis, then one of the ways that you can save money is eliminating the number of teachers while you're giving everybody, or lowering the number of teachers while you're giving everybody else raises. That's what building consolidation allows you to do. But the county is huge. These high schools are deeply, embedded in local communities within the county. Transportation costs would skyrocket. There's a lot of trade-offs involved. Those are the only other pieces that I wanted to add, and I hope I didn't take away from.
No. I mean, it's making me think of another thing I often just have in the back of my head, because you find a lot of these deep red, so to speak, state governments giving teachers raises, just like no questions asked. Just like I remember when Glenn Youngkin was just like, let's pay teachers more. And then you have Greg Abbott, let's pay teachers
Texas
more.
Too, yeah.
Now, and I'm thinking to myself, why are they paying teachers more when they're so against public education? And these are the states where the voucher programs and the homeschooling movements are really so strong. I mean, I think it's definitely to some degree to maintain control. It could be to try to nip protest in the bud, after the Red for Ed wave, wildcat strikes of 2018. And maybe there are a lot of their constituents too, but also for instance, having been in a union in my last university job, a new chancellor came in, and the first thing he did was give a raise and a contract negotiation, and then proceeded to dismantle our system in all of these foundational ways. And then the union was hamstrung, to do anything about it, because he just sort of nipped it in the bud with a salary increase.
The color I would give to that,
and I wonder
is,
if to some degree this
one of
is
the teachers
happening
I
in
had,
Tennessee.
my driver's ed teacher, our driver's ed was taking him on errands, just to color that. It was great. We would go to his bank and stuff. Yeah, he was. Yeah. He would talk about, and
you're driving around anyway.
2000,
I might as well.
2008, probably 2007
really
when I would be taking it, and I'm gonna check out the gubernatorial election for that. But I believe that was one of the last times we had a Democratic governor, Phil Bredesen. And I remember asking him, I was like, "Who are you going to vote for?" And he said, "Phil Bredesen." I was like, "That's kind of strange," because I've figured everyone is Republican, or honestly, a lot of the split is most of your women teachers would be more Democrat. All the males would pretty much be Republican, especially this guy who is I've heard him say things that I just I can't repeat in public. And even in private, I can't repeat them. But he said Phil Bredesen, and what he said was his dad was a teacher. His dad was a longtime teacher, who at the local middle school, and he said teachers vote for Democrats in state elections. He's like, that's what my dad always taught me. He's like, if you're a teacher, you vote for a Democrat in a state election because they'll be better for us. I think probably because of the legacy of just LBJ and all those it just used to be sort of the party. East Tennessee in general is a weird county because it's our congressional district has been Republican since 1864, because it was a hotbed of abolitionists and stuff, and then it just sort of shifted with America, and then it was one of the only regions in the country that became more Republican from 2004 to 2008, just given the we have fewer black people than the rest of Tennessee, but also a lot of racism. It sort of developed into. But yeah, I think it's. The color I would think for that would just be that they know that if they don't sort of take care of the teachers, then it's one of the few powerful sort of political forces or unions in the state, I think. Yeah,
there's almost a culture. There's a culture of it, that they don't want to violate.
The control piece, though, is really worth mentioning as well, because in Texas and in Tennessee, it works the same. There's two aspects here. One is that it's really easy, it's really politically cheap to require teacher salaries to go up without bearing your share as the state government of those costs. That's one thing. And the other thing is that Tennessee, like Texas, as it has increased its contribution to public education, it has tightened the strings on those contributions. So every local school district has its own sets of problems, and local school districts have less and less flexibility to address those because so many of these, so many new state dollars are specifically tied to giving teachers raises. And it's definitely not the case in Texas. I don't think it's the case in Tennessee. That doesn't just mean for like spending on teacher salaries, that like teacher salaries, period, district level expenditures on teachers. It is for each teacher salary. So that creates this competition where you're simultaneously incentivizing cutting teachers while rewarding the teachers who remain. That's the financial vice that is happening. Districts don't get to make a choice about like what is the like class size that we want and how many teachers would it take
always
to
comes with the decrease of autonomy. And particularly fiscal autonomy and their ability to spend higher and do stuff. You'll see in Texas, for instance, that a lot of the big districts now are going to be facing state takeovers. You know, and it's almost as though the teacher raise
like
comes
express
with a
itself in
takeover
the second
kind
meeting,
of
the hour
way.
meeting, where the actual policy, the committee meeting, where they were just sort of reading off, I think it was from the TSBA, like just recommendations of like, I don't know if, I mean, I can't imagine that's maybe directly tied, but there are like all these little policy changes they were saying is like the TSBA, I think it's probably the Tennessee State School Board or whatever, like went through their policy and was like, you guys should change this, you guys should change this, you guys should change this, which just felt like they were sort of being reactive. In a weird way, it almost felt like those stories you hear about like lobbyists written legislation where it's like no one has time to read anything anymore. Like you have an aide covering like 6 policy areas, so they're just getting lobbyists. I don't know.
Yeah. I want to say that's one of the things that makes school board meetings feel like absurdist film in general is that like you have all these like normal people, board members and local constituents walking into a room, and then everything is very tightly controlled by Robert's rules and everything like this. The what is it? TSBA?
Okay.
That's the Tennessee School Boards Association. It's not a state organization.
It's not a state,
it's an organization of school board members. Every state has one of these, and they just sort of
professional organization for the school board members.
Yeah,
they recommend best practices, and that's it. I just did a project on like the Wisconsin State
going
Board
back to the film, it's like there's this odd combination of formality, like in kind of inscrutable spreadsheet style kind of itemization, and then just wild sort of the people,
and then you open the meeting
arriving
with minutes talking about headlights. Is that a new one for you guys? Has that happened yet?
And I think we definitely
in bed bugs.
Headlight, they talk about
are you kidding?
lice for a long time, but lice is a big problem in schools for sure. There were a couple other things I want to get. Maybe what I'll do, I'll weave some things together that sort of that get to some questions I have about career and technical education that does connect to this in the sense of a sort of funny opening to one of those videos. So in terms of career and technical education, I'll just say that they also opened the video by congratulating the 4-H club members for first and third place in the chicken competition. Now, I don't know exactly what the chicken competition would be, but certainly these kids from Roane County did get first and third place in that chicken competition for agriculture. Now in the Roane County most recent audited statement, there isn't an agricultural extension service, but I don't think that it's a very small budget line. I don't think it has anything to do with the situation here. But there is a fairly large career and technical education program line in the built-out schools budget as part of the county audit. Now, the school's financial documents are part of the county. It's like the school board is like a kind of organ of the county, even though
it's a department, basically.
It's a department, but it's not fully underneath the county in the way that others are. In the same way, I think it's slightly ambiguous. But here was the thing that I thought was interesting about this career and technical education program. There's something interesting in the numbers, and then there's something interesting in just the sort of general being of this program. And Derek, I don't know if you saw this
I'll
or
jump
not.
in when I need to.
Okay. First, just like let's talk about the being of this program. Like, I'm not like an expert in career and technical education, but when I looked at the website for all of the programs that this CTE program includes, it was extensive.
Can I just
it
say
was one of
something
the
real
most
quick?
extensive
The fact that it's called
CTE
CTE
offerings
and that
I'd
there's a
ever
lot of
seen.
like
Like
athletes on
is,
it is, I'm just, yeah, this kills
yeah.
me. I didn't realize. Sorry.
I know.
Like,
Football, yeah. I know. It's a terrible branded thing. But they
oh,
called it, they renamed it Career and
yeah, that's
Technical
like the
Education
movie
because
Wait,
it
tell
was
me,
Concussion
I'm
and
not
all
a
the
sports
NFL players
person. What
get.
is it?
Like
Is it concussion?
it's chronic,
Yeah.
traumatic encephalopathy or something like that. Chronic traumatic.
Of
I
course.
forget what it stands for, but it's
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
Sorry.
that's it. Chronic traumatic
Well,
encephalopathy.
oh my gosh. Okay. Well, good.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
And
No, I love this. I love the metonymy. You know, Lacan talks about metonymy, which is like when,
It's like, well,
the
it's,
meanings
I mean, the
of the
allusion
signifiers, the signifieds, it's all messed up. I love this about acronyms. The being of acronyms, it's a huge philosophical aspect of school finance is I would say that in a philosophy of language.
yeah, I mean, again, another the falls, because the falls is like his, like if you,
and the
it's like the
absurdity
fall
of
of man is like a
Here we
recurring
have
thing
it
he
here.
deals with his filmography, and everybody's name falls, and
yes.
yeah.
Everyone's name Fall.
Sorry,
And like,
you're
oh,
gonna have to.
it's such a.
I'm sorry
I
to
really
interrupt you.
liked that. I really liked the movie. Sorry, no. Okay, so like you can go into, and I don't even have the list in front of me, but there's 34 high school and 5 middle school career and technical education programs. That's 34. Like, and they have everything like anything you could imagine. But I was wondering, and here is where the Stranger Things universe of Roane County and Oak Ridge seem to map to one another. One place that I don't know as much about that I'd like to is the Oak Ridge National Laboratory Science Fair. And
My God.
so here's what it says on the Roane County Schools CTE website. When you go to the website, here's what it says. Roane County, it says they offer 34 high school and middle school technical education programs. Then they say, Roane County Schools also encourages non-traditional students to enter STEM and other programs of study listed at the right. I'll just say that it was not listed at the right. You had to go to another website, okay? But they continue to say, one way we introduce those opportunities to students are through the Oak Ridge National Laboratory's Traveling Science Fair. The ORNL Science Fair provides guests of all ages the opportunity to learn more about science and the importance of research being done at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Students enter carnival-style interactive trailers that describe various fields of research and areas of future job opportunities. Get more information at ORISE. Now, ORISE is the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, which is its own institution associated with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which appears to be a kind of propaganda arm of this laboratory that has the world's third most powerful supercomputer, and does things like what was my favorite thing that they do at this place? It's called a neutron spallation. They shoot neutrons at metal and they see what happens. Like literally Stranger Things, like there's a laser beam that hits things and it like very well could be that a tear in space-time opens up and monsters come out. In any case, that's right there on the CTE page. Now, I want to juxtapose this. I found the website of the National Laboratory of Science Fair, and it's like a carnival. It is really like a carnival, and it is the biggest employer. So here you have Roane County Schools offering the career and technical education program sort of hand in hand with the National Laboratory, and sort of doing advertising for this carnival. And then I want to juxtapose this. Now, I don't know if there's any relationship, but I just want to ask. When you go to the 2025 audit and you look at the expenditures for Roane County Schools and you find the career and technical education program line, we see that the expenditures on the budgetary basis were $3.8 million. The budgeted amounts were the original budgeted amount was $5.3 million. The final budgeted amount was $7.35 million, but which means that the excess between the final budgeted amount and the expenditure is $3.5 million, literally double the entire allotted line. And I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but in the audit, there's a reported roughly $3.5 million in the black. Like they have a surplus of about $3.5 million. What is like, why would the career and technical education have a doubling in that way between the final budgeted amount in the expenditure and have a net positive of 3.5 million? Like, I mean, is it to pay for the science fair? Like, is it is there some revenue coming in from
I don't know
other,
if you
another
I
source?
can give
I
some
just
local
thought that
color
was
as far as the
sort of
history
interesting.
of traveling fairs, which is again about to send me into a like depressive spiral. Well, you said about high schools closing. One of the high schools that closed in the 70s or in the 80s and 90s sometime was Oliver Springs High School, which is where my one of my teachers went. He used to tell a story. He had such great stories. He was like the smartest guy I've ever met. Great teacher, brilliant. But he would tell a story about when he there was a traveling circus that came to all the counties in East Tennessee, and you could pay a nickel and give a bear a beer. But he said he would like just start laughing because he said you had to get there before 11 because the bear would just be passed out. The bear would just be just tore up drunk and just like yeah. So you had like people would start queuing up like at daybreak. Now that was like a very funny story. He would just tell this during my Bible history class in high school, public high school, by the way, Bible history class. Later, when I read Child of God by Cormac McCarthy, Cormac is one of our other famous East Tennessee residents, probably our most famous author. That I had to read that like 2 pages at a time because it just kept flashing back to just things that would happen and like in growing up in my high school. He talks about in that book, there was a traveling circus where this guy gets beat up because he it's like you could pay a nickel and try and fight an ape. And so that was just like one of the local traveling circuses. Child of God. It's a really
what's the name
it's
of
a
the book
hard
again?
read. Let me just
Child
tell
of
you.
God?
Child of God. I haven't read that
I'm
one.
living. I'm right now. I'm about a mile away from where he wrote
hard
Spookily.
read.
If
It's
you're
sort
a
of messed
Cormac
up.
fan,
Okay,
where I live in Louisville. Yeah, he has a house over in Louisville.
Suttree. Oh yeah, that Suttree.
I did have a house.
Really like Suttree.
But
really
then
of course he does.
Sure.
Wait, Geoff, just before you go on, there was one other number I forgot to mention, which is just that, and then we can edit it so that hopefully it doesn't make sense. But I just wanted to get it on record that the highest expense for the career and technical education program by far, on an order of exponents, is the vocational instruction equipment.
They probably got some nice
line,
tractors.
which is $1.18 million.
No, that makes sense. We had nice tractors.
It's nice
and like
tractors.
some of the kids, like there were like kids I went to school with who would like their day was like their like school day was to show up and like mow the field or like do that. So like they had like nice riding lawnmowers and like that was like special education in some form. The last thing I'll say just in terms of traveling shows I was just going to say if you look up Mary Elephant on Wikipedia, it's a terrible story, but there was a traveling circus. We were one of the last states to hang an elephant from a crane, like execute an elephant. If you want to just ruin your total day, you can then go to the history of elephant execution in the United States, in which that was apparently a thing for like 100 years, where we were just hanging an elephant in this country. But Tennessee has a notably famous example of that in East Tennessee, not in Roane County, but a little bit east of where I am now. But that's all to say that it's funny you mentioned, I've never heard of this traveling fair. So the idea of there being like some type of traveling fair that's kind of like, that doesn't make sense, that I understand. But
it sounds to me like they're to do the propaganda. They have used something that is organically of the culture of that area. That is to say, the traveling fair, and made it a science fair. There was science fairs where kids present science projects, and there's a competition, and everyone. It's kind of fun.
There was actually a fair, like it is a carnival where you there was like a competition, but it was like once a year. I can't imagine that costing. Yeah,
this isn't that. This is trailer style exhibitions for adults to figure out how they can work for the laboratory and probably just feel good about the laboratory.
Yeah, that's right.
Even though it's going to bring the upside down into
exactly.
And what my conspiratorial mind, I'm sure it's not, but my conspiratorial mind is that this excess mystery $3.5 million
the truly dark
is just a way to get money
sad
into
part
this
about this is like, as much as I would love for it to be like Stranger Things and like bring on Vecna, you know what I'm saying? Bring on the Demogorgon, bring it all on. Who cares? Like that'd be, like we just, if any county deserves it, it's like entirety of East Tennessee. Having said that, like, the sadder truth is just that like there was like friends that I had, like one of my friends, like he was very poor. And so like people would go and catch catfish in the local Watts Bar Lake or like whatever. And they'd bring it and he'd eat it for like weeks at a time. Just as a kid.
Yeah.
And, I make fun of him now. I was like, you're basically going to turn into Vecna, because like, if you then read academic studies, catfish are 96% contaminated with PCBs, with mercury, with radium, with cesium-137, with uranium, with all these things that they sort of dump down there. And not only that, but to the earlier thing I alluded to, Derek, about that you brought up about like the racial disparity, there's actually even been academic studies by others that the signs they put up all around the lake, there's all these horrible signs of these horrified looking turtles that are like frightened, that says, do not eat the turtles in the lake. If you're pregnant, you can have like catfish like once every couple of months. Don't eat any cat. You can have like bass once a month. But these damn signs that they put up were themselves racialized. Like it was like they did a study and they put them less up in sort of the black parts of the county. And so like even the poor white people got slightly more than the poor black people.
Sure.
And it's just like sort of a microcosm for talk. It's just caste. I mean, I never thought of it. Yeah, it is just caste system all the way down, which
Vecna and Stranger Things is sort of a fantastical dissociation.
And I know we're
evil,
probably we're gonna have to. I did want to just. I would be remiss if I didn't call out one thing, which was my favorite part of either of the meetings, where they're talking about how they have. They're painting the schools with free labor from the sheriff's department. I think in the first. Yeah. So speaking of cast, there's even a cast.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
That's something that stood out to me. It turns out.
They were making fun of him, which I thought was rude.
Ambivalent about it, like, well, we have to use the inmates, and we thank the inmates, but there's a law on the books that state and local governments in Tennessee have to purchase from the Tennessee correctional supply, services and stuff by prison labor, and. Like, and essentially they have to do the painting during the summer because by law also the inmates can't be there when the students are there.
The last in 2022, we finally, there was the Tennessee Amendment 3, which was adding language to Article 11 of the Constitution of Tennessee. I remember when I voted, I was like, what the hell is this? Of like, it says slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited.
It's not a
Nothing in the
podcast.
Section shall prohibit an inmate from working when the inmate has been duly convicted of a crime. Is literally in our Constitution.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the 13th Amendment loophole. The first time, I should say this, like, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, famously the Reconstruction Amendments, the original Constitution didn't say anything about slavery. The only mention of slavery in the Constitution is in an amendment that allows it, is the deep irony there, under certain conditions. Couple quick points on CTE generally, if I may. Yeah. So the history of CTE, like the branding problem of, head injuries and stuff is too bad, but the name CTE emerges from trying to distance themselves from vocational education, which had become just like a dumping ground for students who didn't want to do real education. In 1983, the Perkins Act is enacted federally that starts pouring federal money and attention into this. And in the wake, basically, of No Child Left Behind, which was like a college for all, test-based, everybody's got to be proficient at specifically academic skills stuff, the growth of CTE funding and attention at the state level provided one way of sort of pushing back against this. Some kids aren't going to go to college, so we need to prepare them for real life and real life jobs that are there in their community. There's a whole infrastructure. You saw like there's 16 national career clusters that are named in various things. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is involved. The states have various ways of organizing these kinds of things, and they have direct funding streams to this particular program, which is what makes it so attractive for individual districts to use. But CTE and STEM, I want to say, are sort of two sides of the same coin. STEM's big growth in the last several years has been like, here's a way for smart mathy people to guarantee themselves employment, or like that's the marketing. Here's how you give yourself an advantage in the job market. My friend, the labor and education historian, John Shelton, likes to be like, well, this is just like a subsidy for like light manufacturers who don't want to train their own workers in the Green Bay area. Meanwhile, CTE continues to be like, we're not talking about the smart mathy people. That's not how it's. We're talking about people who are going to go pour concrete after they get out of high school, or are going to join an excavating company, or going to be welders or machinists or whatever. And that's one of the programs that is on offer. And that stuff, I also want to say, does matter. Like it does matter, but the quality, as you might imagine, varies tremendously. One of my good friends at Johns Hopkins, the scholar Jay Plasman, like CTE is his thing. And so I've absorbed some of this by osmosis, but also in my day job, I survey in school districts and communities around what they want. And a lot of people talk about more direct, like career preparation stuff or real life preparation stuff alongside academics. So these three things, academics, STEM, and CTE are in this weird
it's just so fascinating
relationship.
I mean, honestly, even hearing two academics talk about it, it's just I don't know. It's surreal. I just as someone who's on the other end of it, just like interesting.
Also, weirdly, there is no ag program in Roane County, like, period. There's
had an FFA
there's no Future
at our
Farmers
high
of
school.
America. There's nobody on the payroll that is like an
at least as
teacher.
2008
None of the career paths. Interesting. That might have gone away. It also might not be something that the school district provides. There might be like a 4-H or something of that nature that is like run by the county, but not by the school districts. Yeah.
Well, I think we answered the question to some degree, or maybe we brought more questions up. But I think, just like in the falls, the numbers and the budget documents really brings a sort of world to life, an absurd world full of humor and death. And I think we've really gotten to it this time. So I wanted to thank Geoff from the Trade Movies podcast again for joining us.
And please check out
check out
Trade Movies podcast
you want to pitch
on
anything
all platforms.
specifically?
If you want to know about the coal ash spill, I did an interview with Jared Sullivan, who wrote a book that I really want to shout out called Valley So Low, One Lawyer's Fight for Justice in the Wake of America's Great Coal Catastrophe. It is a tremendous book that sort of covers the coal ash spill from soup to nuts. So happy to see that. And I'll leave you with one last anecdote. I didn't get to do this, but part of the CTE 2 years before, because my buddy was in there, he got to go on a field trip. This would have been about 2002 or 2003 to shoot shotguns. So parents brought their shotguns to school, checked them in. Imagine this, just a final bit of color. This post-Columbine, 2002, 2003, parents all brought shotguns to school. They checked them in. They went off and shot skeet, and that was the technical path for the day.
Like immediately post-Columbine.
Good. Yeah.
Oh man! Wow.
Amazing.
Well, just to I'll leave us with one other thing. We actually have a live event coming up. Budget Committee will be in Chicago on September 6th at 10 a.m. at Daly Plaza across the street from the county tax assessor's office. We'll be recording a live episode on Chicago public schools and money problems in Chicago generally. So if you're around that area, come and see us. The Socialism Conference is actually happening there at the same time. So if you're there, come and check us out on Sunday the 6th at 10 a.m.